Chapter 13 of The Pathfinder. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This recording is by Mark Smith of Simpsonville, South Carolina. The Pathfinder by James Fenimore Cooper. Chapter 13. The goblin now the fool alarms, hags meet to mumble o'er their charms, the nightmare rides the dreaming ass, and fairies trip it on the grass. Attributed to Cotton. The embarkation of so small a party was a matter of no great delay or embarrassment. The whole force confided to the care of Sergeant Dunham consisted of but 10 privates and 2 non-commissioned officers, though it was soon positively known that Mr. Muir was to accompany the expedition. The quartermaster, however, went as a volunteer, while some duty connected with his own department, as had been arranged between him and his commander, was the avowed object. To these must be added the Pathfinder and Cap, with Jasper and his subordinates, one of whom was a boy. The party consequently consisted of less than 20 men and a lad of 14. Mabel and the wife of a common soldier were the only females. Sergeant Dunham carried off his command in a large bateau, and then returned for his final orders, and to see that his brother-in-law and daughter were properly attended to. Having pointed out to Cap the boat that he and Mabel were to use, he ascended the hill to seek his last interview with Lundie. It was nearly dark when Mabel found herself in the boat that was to carry her off to the cutter. So very smooth was the surface of the lake that it was not found necessary to bring the bateau into the river to receive their freights, but the beach outside being totally without surf, and the water as tranquil as that of a pond, everybody embarked there. When the boat left the land, Mabel would not have known that she was afloat on so broad a sheet of water by any movement which is usual to such circumstances. The oars had barely time to give a dozen strokes when the boat lay at the cutter's side. Jasper was in readiness to receive his passengers, and as the deck of the Scud was but 2 or 3 feet above the water, no difficulty was experienced in getting on board of her. As soon as this was effected, the young man pointed out to Mabel and her companion the accommodations prepared for their reception. The little vessel contained 4 apartments below, all between decks having been expressly constructed with a view to the transportation of officers and men, with their wives and families. First in rank was what was called the after cabin, a small apartment that contained 4 berths, and which enjoyed the advantage of possessing small windows for the admission of air and light. This was uniformly devoted to females whenever any were on board, and as Mabel and her companion were alone, they had ample accommodation. The main cabin was larger and lighted from above. It was now appropriated to the quartermaster, the sergeant, Cap, and Jasper, the Pathfinder roaming through any part of the cutter he pleased, the female apartment excepted. The corporals and common soldiers occupied the space beneath the main hatch, which had a deck for such a purpose, while the crew were berthed as usual in the forecastle. Although the cutter did not measure quite 50 tons, the draught of officers and men was so light that there was ample room for all on board, there being space enough to accommodate treble the number if necessary. As soon as Mabel had taken possession of her own really comfortable cabin, in doing which she could not abstain from indulging in the pleasant reflection that some of Jasper's favor had been especially manifested in her behalf, she went on deck again. Here all was momentarily in motion. The men were roving to and fro in quest of their knapsacks and other effects, but method and habit soon reduced things to order, when the stillness on board became even imposing, for it was connected with the idea of future adventure and ominous preparation. Darkness was now beginning to render objects on shore indistinct, the whole of the land forming one shapeless black outline of even forest summits, to be distinguished from the impending heavens only by the greater light of the sky. The stars, however, soon began to appear in the latter, one after another, in their usual mild, placid lustre, bringing with them that sense of quiet which ordinarily accompanies night. There was something soothing as well as exciting, in such a scene, and Mabel, who was seated on the quarter-deck, sensibly felt both influences. The Pathfinder was standing near her, leaning as usual on his long rifle, and she fancied that, through the growing darkness of the hour, she could trace even stronger lines of thought than usual in his rugged countenance. "To you, Pathfinder, expeditions like this can be no great novelty," said she, "though I am surprised to find how silent and thoughtful the men appear to be." "We learn this by making war ag'in Indians. Your militia are great talkers and little doers in general, but the soldier who has often met the Mingos learns to know the value of a prudent tongue. A silent army in the woods is doubly strong, and a noisy one doubly weak. If tongues made soldiers, the women of the camp would generally carry the day." "But we are neither an army nor in the woods. There can be no danger of Mingos in the Scud." "No one is safe from a Mingo, who does not understand his very nature, and even then he must act up to his own knowledge, and that closely. Ask Jasper how he got command of this very cutter." "And how did he get command?" inquired Mabel, with an earnestness and interest that quite delighted her simple-minded and true-hearted companion, who was never better pleased than when he had an opportunity of saying aught in favor of a friend. "It is honorable to him that he has reached this station while yet so young." "That is it; but he deserved it all, and more. A frigate wouldn't have been too much to pay for so much spirit and coolness, had there been such a thing on Ontario, as there is not, howsoever, or likely to be." "But, Jasper, you have not yet told me how he got command of the schooner." "It's a long story, Mabel, and one your father, the Sergeant, can tell much better than I, for he was present, while I was off on a distant scouting. Jasper is not good at a story, I will own that. I have heard him questioned about this affair, and he never made a good tale of it, though everybody knows it was a good thing. The Scud had near fallen into the hands of the French and the Mingos, when Jasper saved her, in a way which none but a quick-witted mind and a bold heart would have attempted. The Sergeant will tell the tale better than I can, and I wish you to question him some day, when nothing better offers." Mabel determined to ask her father to repeat the incidents of the affair that very night, for it struck her young fancy that nothing better could well offer than to listen to the praises of one who was a bad historian of his own exploits. "Will the Scud remain with us when we reach the island?" she asked, after a little hesitation about the propriety of the question. "Or shall we be left to ourselves?" "That's as may be. Jasper does not often keep the cutter idle when anything is to be done, and we may expect activity on his part. My gifts, however, run so little towards the water and vessels generally, unless it be among rapids and falls and in canoes, that I pretend to know nothing about it. We shall have all right under Jasper, I make no doubt, who can find a trail on Ontario as well as a Delaware can find one on the land." "And our own Delaware, Pathfinder, the Big Serpent, why is he not with us tonight?" "Your question would have been more natural had you said, 'Why are you here, Pathfinder?' The Sarpent is in his place, while I am not in mine. He is out, with 2 or 3 more, scouting the lake shores, and will join us down among the islands, with the tidings he may gather. The Sergeant is too good a soldier to forget his rear while he is facing the enemy in front. It's a thousand pities, Mabel, your father wasn't born a general, as some of the English are who come among us, for I feel sartain he wouldn't leave a Frencher in the Canadas a week, could he have his own way with them." "Shall we have enemies to face in front?" asked Mabel, smiling, and for the first time feeling a slight apprehension about the dangers of the expedition. "Are we likely to have an engagement?" "If we have, Mabel, there will be men enough ready and willing to stand between you and harm. But you are a soldier's daughter, and, we all know, have the spirit of one. Don't let the fear of a battle keep your pretty eyes from sleeping." "I do feel braver out here in the woods, Pathfinder, than I ever felt before amid the weaknesses of the towns, though I have always tried to remember what I owe to my dear father." "Ay, your mother was so before you. You will find, Mabel,